Hello, America, and to our friends around the world. Welcome back to What Everybody is Saying, an ex-FBI Agent's Guide to Speed Reading People, Chapter 2, Comfort, Discomfort, and Pacifiers. To borrow a phrase from the old Star Trek series, the prime directive of the limbic brain is to ensure our survival as a species. It does this by being programmed to make us secure by avoiding danger or discomfort and seeking safety or comfort whenever possible. I'd like to interject and add that we seek what's familiar because the unknown is uncomfortable. We seek the familiar because the unknown is uncomfortable. All right, so let's go back to the book here. It also allows us to remember experiences from our past encounters and build upon them. Thus far, we have seen how efficiently the limbic system helps us to deal with threats. Now, let's look at how our brain and body work together to comfort us and give us confidence in our personal safety. When we experience a sense of comfort, well being, the limbic brain leaks this information in the form of body language congruent with our positive feelings. There's that word, congruent. I've used it before when describing when your body language is in alignment with whatever is occurring. The snapping of the head at the sound of a horn, the look of surprise when you walk into a room and find unexpected guests, whether good or bad guests, that's up to you. When there's that microsecond delay, that's when you're going to start seeing the incongruencies. That's how you can begin to recognize the poker tells or the misalignments. The feet pointed towards the door, one or both, as they're pointed away from you and pointed towards what it is that they actually intend or want. Another word for that, desire. Observe someone resting in a hammock on a breezy day. His body reflects the high comfort being experienced by his brain. On the other hand, when we feel distressed, discomfort, the limbic brain expresses nonverbal behavior that mirrors our negative state of being. All you need to do is picture a toddler, um, especially a toddler boy, who is more excited about wanting to remain outside playing rather than utilizing the bathroom, lavatory, toilet, whatever your descriptor of choice is on that, but having to answer the call of nature. That the pee pee dance. We've all seen it. We all recognize it. That is a sign of discomfort, a sign of distress. The limbic brain expresses nonverbal behavior that mirrors our negative state of being. Just watch the people at the airport when a flight is canceled or delayed. Their bodies say it all. Therefore, we want to learn to look more closely at the comfort and discomfort behaviors we see every day and use them to assess for feelings, thoughts, and intentions. In general, when the limbic brain is in a state of comfort, this mental and physiological well being is reflected in nonverbal displays of contentment and high confidence. When, however, the limbic brain is experiencing discomfort, the corresponding body language is characterized by behaviors emblematic of stress or low confidence. Knowledge of these behavioral markers or tells will help you determine what a person may be thinking or how to act or what to expect when dealing with other people in any social or work context. All right, that's the end of that section. But before we proceed, Janine Driver, former alcohol, tobacco, firearms agent, wrote a book on body language, and she instructs the reader, and I've mentioned this before, to record your own actions for the period of an hour and observe what it is that you're doing. Because the premise is this: if you're recording yourself, you're going to behave differently, whether you're doing it, somebody else is doing it. But after a period of time, your behavior becomes normalized. You become desensitized to the reality of the camera being there, and you slip back into your baseline behavior. That's the reason you do it for an hour. Yes, I know, but I don't have an hour to do something like that. Well, that's going to be the first issue you're going to have to overcome. The second issue is reviewing the video footage of that hour and taking notes of what it is that you're doing during that course of an hour. So you're looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 hours of performing, for lack of a better word, on camera to establish your baseline, followed by an hour of note taking, potentially 2 hours because of the pausing, rewinding, restarting, and documenting the timestamps and the behavioral movements, gestures, expressions that you are exhibiting that you can identify. By doing this, you are going to be able to start doing. Um, Dr. Robert Glover, the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, I met him well over a decade ago. And one thing that he encouraged myself and others to do was when we are retelling an event, there was an egg timer. You know what an egg timer is. The sands of an hourglass, so what was it? The so so as the sands of an hourglass, so go the days of our lives, or something like that. I don't watch soap operas. I just remember the Bill and Ted uh, excellent adventure using that as a way to entice Socrates to join them on their adventure. Uh, Going back to where we're at with this. All right, so getting back to Dr. Glover and his egg timer. We would pass around when we met up, the group of us, we would pass an egg timer, and each participant had that 60 seconds or so in order to learn how to utilize the skill of brevity. Now, granted, I'm doing this production here, reading this book, and then adding anecdotal information to flesh it out for you. Not exactly being brief, not exactly being concise. But these tools that Dr. Glover presented to us, I found to be very, very effective. And that is, you want to be able to deliver the core of what it is that you are intending your message to be: direct, informative, and in a short amount of time with the least amount of words or opportunity for it to be confused. That's the reason behind the egg timer. You take this in conjunction with, analyzing your body language. You can see what it is that you're doing, and then but the next step that Dr. Glover incorporated was, he referred to it as, consider yourself the New York Times reporter. My opinion of the New York Times has been tainted by the revelation of Jason Blair being a plagiarist and making false news reports and all that. So I don't have a high regard for it. But if you take a journalist's profession of what they are supposed to be, of what society idealizes them as, and that is an observer, a nonpartisan, unaffected Joe Friday, just the facts, reporter of the events. So you take that in conjunction with the concept of brevity, of expressing what it is you're observing within a short order of time with the least amount of words, and you do it with being unaffected by what it is that you observe, that you just report that there was blood, instead of saying there was blood everywhere, there was a dozen individuals of whom four people were injured and one of them was bleeding severely. The hyperbolic is to say there was blood everywhere, mayhem, was reign supreme. Why does that work? Because it appeals to the emotion. It appeals to somebody's imagination to create an image of catastrophe. Whereas the unaffected observer documenting the facts will be able to identify, and this goes back to the observation exercise that was alluded to in chapter 1, and that is being able to recount the exact number of individuals of those who were injured and what were the details of those injuries. And how does this tie into Janine Driver's book? By establishing a video of yourself, you're not going to be able to feign and act for an hour. This is why, for example, plays are done in scenes, movies, television shows are done in scenes, is because they capture an image for a moment, then they cut, and then they take a break so that everybody can get emotionally aligned again because you're manufacturing. Whereas what you want to do, you don't want to be manufacturing with jump cuts. You want to be able to watch for an hour and document what it is that you're doing. Do you use your left hand to scratch your nose or do you use your right hand? How frequently do you tap your pencil when taking notes? What position do you sit in when you're watching a video? When you're reading a book, how do you know that you've gotten to a good part? This is what you're documenting. And it doesn't have to be relegated to just that. Refrain from doing the makeup videos. These individuals who insist upon get ready with me while I dump on whatever emotional trauma that I've seen so many of those. It's uh, anyway. It's not about posing and doing that. It's about doing. It's about living. And all you're doing is documenting what tells you are broadcasting. So when you are interacting with others, number one, you know what you're broadcasting to others. Number two, you can intuit by this experience of the information that's being provided in this book, the behavioral table of elements, the action units, the METT videos. You can then take all of that knowledge, synthesize your intuition of what it is that you're reading off of others. That's all. That's why I keep emphasizing the value of doing this. Now we're going to get into the importance of pacifying behaviors. Understanding how the limbic system's freeze, flight, and fight responses influence nonverbal behavior is only part of the equation. As you study nonverbal behavior, you will discover that whenever there is a limbic response, especially to a negative or threatening experience, it will be followed by what I call pacifying behaviors. Navarro, 2007, pages 141 through 163. A pacifying behavior. We're going to have the images put on here eventually, but essentially raising one hand to massage the nape of the neck, the back of the neck. Palms down, facing down. If you're seated, for example, palms facing down and soothing your thighs, pushing outward towards the knees. Women twisting their hair, playing with their hair, playing with a necklace. Those are demonstrations of self-soothing actions, behaviors. These actions, often referred to in the literature as adapters, serve to calm us down after we experience something unpleasant or downright nasty. Knapp and Hall, 2002, pages 41, 42. In its attempt to restore itself to normal conditions, the brain enlists the body to provide comforting or pacifying behaviors. Since these are outward signals that can be read in real time, we can observe and decode them immediately and in context. Pacifying is not unique to our species. For example, cats and dogs lick themselves and each other to pacify. Humans engage in much more diverse pacification behaviors. Some are very obvious, while others are much more subtle. Most people would readily think of a child's thumb sucking when asked to identify a pacifying behavior, but do not realize that after we outgrow the comfort display, we adopt more discreet and socially acceptable ways to satisfy the need to calm ourselves. For example, chewing gum, biting pencils. Most people don't notice the more subtle pacifying behaviors or are unaware of their significance in revealing a person's thoughts and feelings. That is unfortunate. To be successful at reading nonverbal behavior, learning to recognize and decode human pacifiers is absolutely critical. Why? Because pacifying behaviors reveal so much about a person's current state of mind, and they do so with uncanny accuracy. I look for pacifying behaviors in people to tell me when they are not at ease or when they are reacting negatively to something I have done or said. In an interview situation, such a display might be in response to a specific question or comment. Behaviors that signal discomfort, for example, leaning away, a frown, crossed or tense arms, are usually followed by the brain enlisting the hands to pacify. I look for these behaviors to confirm what is going on in the mind of the person with whom I am dealing. As a specific example, if every time I ask a subject, "Do you know Mr. Hillman?" he responds, "No," but then immediately touches his neck or mouth, I know he is pacifying to that specific question. I just got done inserting the various different figures, 7, 8, and 9. So screenshot those, notate them so that you know what he's describing here. This one refers to figure 9. I don't know if he is lying because deception is notoriously difficult to detect, but I do know that he is bothered by the inquiry, so much so that he has to pacify himself after he hears it. This will prompt me to probe further into this area of inquiry. Pacifying behaviors are important for an investigator to note, since sometimes they help us uncover a lie or hidden information. I find pacifying indicators of greater significance and reliability than trying to establish veracity. They help to identify what specific subjects trouble or distress a person. Knowing these can often lead to evincing information previously hidden that might give us new insights. All right, box 10, captured in the neck of time. Neck touching and or stroking is one of the most significant and frequent pacifying behaviors we use in responding to stress. When women pacify using the neck, they often do so by covering or touching their suprasternal notch. That's suprasternal notch with their hand, figure 7. Suprasternal notch is the hollow area between the Adam's apple and the breastbone that is sometimes referred to as the neck dimple. When a woman touches this part of her neck and or covers it with her hand, it is typically because she feels distressed, threatened, uncomfortable, insecure, or fearful. This is a relatively significant behavioral clue that can be used to detect, among other things, the discomfort experienced when a person is lying or concealing important information. I once worked on an investigation where we thought an armed and dangerous fugitive might be hiding out at his mother's home. Another agent and I went to the woman's house, and when we knocked at the door, she agreed to let us in. We showed our identification and began asking her a series of questions. When I inquired, "Is your son in the house?" she put her hand to her suprasternal notch and said, "No, he's not." I noted her behavior, and we continued with our questioning. After a few minutes, I asked, "Is it possible that while you were at work, your son could have sneaked into the house?" Once again, she put her hand up to her neck dimple and replied, "No, I didn't know that." I was now confident that her son was in the house because the only time she moved her hand to her neck was when I suggested that possibility. To make absolutely sure my assumption was correct, we continued to speak with the woman until, as we prepared to leave, I made one last inquiry, just so I can finalize my records. "You're positive he's not in the house, right?" For a third time, her hand went to her neck as she affirmed her earlier answer. I was now certain the woman was lying. I asked for permission to search the house, and sure enough, her son was hiding in a closet under some blankets. She was lucky she was not charged with obstruction of justice. Her discomfort in lying to the police about her fugitive son caused her limbic system to generate a pacifying behavior that tipped her hand and gave her away. All right, that concludes this section of chapter 2. Next, we will resume with types of pacifying behaviors.